Hi, this is Connor Rothschild, and today I am presenting my final project for DSci 304, Introduction to Effective Data Visualization. My project is titled The Birth, Death, and Rebirth of Kanye West, an exploration of how Kanye West's music has changed over time. Kanye West is an international phenomenon. He's sold over 140 million records and received 21 Grammy Awards. And part of Kanye's appeal is his musical variety, with a discography that's been inspired by classic hip-hop as well as dubstep. But fans of Kanye West know that as often as his musical tenor has changed, so too has his persona. The quote-unquote Kanye story is one of growth, struggle, triumph, and for many, confusion. This project hopes to demystify some of Kanye West's evolution by exploring how in specific his music has changed over time. By analyzing audio features from Spotify's API, we're able to track the birth, death, and rebirth of Kanye West and his music. In order to do so, we're going to rely on audio features provided by Spotify. Although we won't look at every single feature that Spotify provides, here's a glimpse of acousticness, which is a confidence measure from 0 to 1, which represents whether or not Spotify believes that a track is acoustic. And as we see from this histogram, Spotify records most of their music as not acoustic at all. And so for each audio feature, like acousticness, a song on Spotify is given a score, usually between 0 and 1. And if you're interested in the full list of audio features, you can visit the Spotify API. But to see how these features unfold with respect to Kanye West's collection, we can take a look at each song as it's scored with respect to danceability. Again, on a scale of 0 to 1, with how danceable Spotify thinks the song is. And what we see from this bee-swarm plot is the distribution of songs covers a lot of different values. And the most danceable album, according to Spotify, is Ye, Kanye West 2018 album. And the least danceable is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And so according to the data, we can see the most danceable song is All Mine from his 2018 album Ye, and the least danceable is I'll Fly Away from his 2004 album, The College Dropout. And to fully understand just how accurate these kind of assessments are, we can listen to the least danceable song according to Spotify. And as we can see, this rendition of the song All Fly Away is definitely not a danceable song. But the problem with danceability is that a lot of the values center around the same mean, somewhere around 0.5 to 0.6, and so it's difficult to assess how albums differ across Kanye's discography. And a better value that we can look at, a better feature, is that of valence, which Spotify defines as used to determine the musical positiveness of a track, whether it's happy, cheerful, and euphoric, or whether it's low valence, sad, depressed, and angry. What we see here is a different story with respect to Kanye's music, with some songs being overwhelmingly happy with a high valence of around 0.67, and some being remarkably low with the valence of 0.29. And so the best way to understand how valence has changed is to look at specific albums. And the best way to do that is through a bar chart rather than looking at each individual song. And so what we see from this bar chart is essentially the same thing as what we saw in the bee swarm plot, with the exception that it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater, and we can really see album level insights on the aggregate more easily. And again, we notice that Ye, his 2018 album, is the least positive album in his collection, and The College Dropout, his 2004 album, is the most positive. And so in order to see how Kanye's music has changed over time, we should order these albums by the year that they were released. And here, the albums appear in the order of when they came out. What we see is that this tells a different story than the prior plots. Specifically that Kanye's early music was much more positive, and following his 2007 album Graduation, Kanye's music became considerably darker. Although there was some variance in the albums following, for the most part his albums remained pretty dark, with significantly lower valence than the pre-graduation period. That's because these years following graduation were filled with loss, depression, and as many of us know, global infamy. Kanye's mother passed away in December 2007, and in the years that followed, the situation continued to get worse and worse, culminating in the 2009 Video Music Awards, when Kanye West interrupted Taylor Swift.
Yo, Taylor, I'm I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
And it was in the aftermaths of events such as these that Kanye spiraled into depression and, in his own words, contemplated suicide. That explains why Kanye's discography up until graduation had an average valence score of 0.58, and those albums released after graduation have an average valence score of 0.38. But as recently in 2018, Kanye West went through a self-described spiritual and political transformation, and last year it became apparent that Kanye was definitely not his old self, from becoming a born-again Christian to tweeting things like Trump all day. It was during this time that Mr. West came out with arguably his most unique album yet, Jesus is King. And as each of these song titles represents, this album was a significant departure from his prior albums, with religious and spiritual not only undertones, but quite literal content. And so Jesus is King was released in October of 2019 with his newly formed gospel group, the Sunday Service Choir. And whenever asked about the purpose of the album, Kanye said that this album has been made to be an expression of the gospel and to share the gospel and the truth of what Jesus has done to me. When I think of the goodness of Jesus and all that he does for me, my soul cries out. And although we know from these kind of tweets and these kind of statements that Kanye West is in a different stage of his life, the question of whether his music is in a new era has not yet been answered. In this post, or in this project, I'm asking whether the release of Jesus is King represents a new era in Kanye's discography, akin to the post-graduation Kanye, but in the opposite direction. Now, I'll leave the definitive answer to this question unresolved, particularly because we're yet to see how Kanye's music will continue to evolve and grow and change after Jesus is King. But here, we can explore each of Spotify's audio features to answer the question: how does Kanye's most recent album compare to his previous ones? Aside from his spiritual transformation, has he been musically born again? And again, what we see here is a bar chart with Jesus is King highlighted, and we can go over each audio feature and see how this album differs from his previous albums, to see if he's really experiencing a rebirth, or if this album musically is the same as his prior ones. I won't go over each audio feature, but some interesting highlights are that Kanye's Jesus is King is significantly more acoustic than every other album that he has ever released, and also according to its duration, it's one of the shortest albums in his entire discography, only being beat out by his 2005 album, Late Registration. So again, I won't go over each audio feature, and I won't answer the question of whether he's truly experienced a rebirth, because we're yet to see how his future albums will continue to differ from his prior ones, but I hope that you explore the plots in this post, and that you can also find to see how Kanye West's music has changed along with his persona with the release of Jesus is King. Thank you.